material that you have. One, I sent you a descriptions this morning of the 8 functions, and I wanted to do that because I had included them in the set of PowerPoints, slides in the PowerPoints as a way of defining them for you, and I just decided to send you another Word document that just had those definitions instead. But as we start to look at the teams and those handouts, what I'd like for us to get to is what we have on the slide 2, which is where we look at how to take these function archetypes and start to look at a team. And so I'm going to work through how I built this for you. And please, as we're going, don't hesitate to enter your chats, and I'll do the best I can here with your questions or comments in the chat box, and I will do the best I can to keep focused on that as well so that I pick up your chat as soon as it comes in. The first thing I do when I spread a team across there, and this team consists of 1 ESTP, 2 ISTJs, 1 INFP, and 1 ENFP. So again, that's 1 ESTP, 2 ISTJs. You've got 1 INFP and 1 ENFP. And so in a lot of ways you would think that, okay, these people have a lot in similarity. So like you've got 3 with ST, and you've got 2 with, with NF. And so we want to look at how moving from preferences to the 8 functions give us some greater insight. And so the first thing I do is I put them on the chart. And once I've gotten them spread across the chart using the 8 function archetype model where we've got 1 function attitude in each of the 8 positions, I'm now ready to start analyzing my team. And I look for where do I have blank spots, because what we have found in our work with teams is that when nobody prefers a function attitude at either the first level or the second level, which is the hero or the good parent archetype, that those function attitudes are ones that they tend to ignore, or they're like the blind spots for them. And so as we look at this team, we see that introverted intuition and extroverted feeling are blind spots. Now, the next thing I look at on a team is what function attitudes are conscious. And here we have that almost all of the team members share extroverted intuition and consciousness and extroverted feeling and consciousness. We've got 1 team member over here that has extroverted sensing and consciousness. But primarily what we're going to hear as this team engages is extroverted intuition and extroverted thinking. Now, what we're not going to hear that's going to be working behind the scenes primarily for this team is the introverted functions that are in consciousness. So we're going to hear a lot of introverted sensation. We're going to hear a lot of introverted feeling behind the scenes, often expressed through the extroverted intuition and the extroverted thinking. What that means is that the team members often aren't sharing the content of those introverted function attitudes, yet they're very aware of them and using them. And so what we find is they're using them as though the other team members were aware of them. So like with introverted feeling, which is about one's core values, I'm very aware of the core values and I'm applying them as I put together what I'm saying or my thoughts. But as I express my thoughts, I don't let you know the core values that are being applied. Or with introverted sensation, I'm pulling from my past experience, but I'm not sharing with you what that past experience is. I'm just sharing with you how I'm applying it, probably through the extroverted thinking, maybe through the extroverted intuition. And so what I find is often the introverted functions that are conscious for us are derailers because we act as though everyone knows that information or has access to that information when really they don't. And Richard, you're saying, how do we know that? Tell me what you mean about how do we know that? Because I need to know what that is in order to respond. I'm going to wait. Well, I know what types are being analyzed because I built the table. And I built the table. If you look at the handout I sent you, and I'll also, let me see if I can't, I'll get to it on a slide right quick. It should be, if you would look in your handout and go to slides 9 and 10, if you've got the slides printed, I have the slides available to you. Look at slides 9 and 10. What we see on slide 9 is we've got ISTJs with introverted sensing as a dominant, extroverted thinking as a second or auxiliary, introverted feeling as a third or tertiary, extroverted intuition as a fourth or inferior process, and then you change the attitudes on those same functions to get the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so that gives you the ISTJ. You can look over at the INFP and you see introverted feeling as the first or dominant heroic function, extroverted intuition in that auxiliary, and so on down. And so as I took the type codes that the people had decided were their best fit type codes, I then put them together to build a team. Richard, does that explain how I know what they are, the types they are? Oh, you're correct, because I had to add these in order to talk about this. I had to go back in and recreate this. When I was rehearsing this morning, I realized I needed to structure my slides a little differently to get them to build. So that should be like slide 3 or something for you. So once I have identified the functions that they're going to be aware of but not sharing with others, I then look at what team members might be not fitting in with the team. And so in this case, it's the ESTP. And so I look at this ESTP, and he's the one showing up in yellow. And I notice that I go to his dominant function, and nobody prefers his dominant function attitude at either the auxiliary, tertiary, or inferior levels, second, third, or fourth, are all blank. And I go look over at the TI, and Richard, I'll try to answer that one in just a second. I go over and look at TI, and nobody prefers his auxiliary at either the third or fourth level. So nobody prefers his dominant or auxiliary at a conscious level. And so what that means is that the functions, that the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th positions, when we have a function in that position, our first reaction to that function is normally negative when somebody else uses it. And so that's correct. The ESTP functions are lit up in yellow. That's right. And so this ESTP is really struggling to become part of the team. Now, what our work has found is that if we can engage with the team at the time the ESTP is becoming part of the team, we can have some success in helping them respect the differences. However, if we don't have the opportunity to engage until a lot of water's gone under the bridge, and so now the ESTP is not fitting in and is feeling disrespected by the other team members, or perceives that the other team members are disrespecting him or her. Then we find it very difficult to get them to move past what's already happened. And often at that point, it's, we find the ESTPs often elect to, or the person that's in this situation. In this case, I've highlighted it as an ESTP in this example. Often that person will opt to just not be part of the team unless it's going to have a negative impact on their career. And if it's going to have a negative impact on their career and they want to stay with the team, then that's where we've got to do the work of trying to help the ESTP not fit in and help them overcome that so that they start to fit in, which gets into working with those people who have the function in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th position to respect what extroverted sensation brings to the table, and also getting them to respect what introverted thinking brings to the table. And so as we can get them to recognize that the use of the extroverted sensation and the introverted thinking that the ESTP naturally brings eliminates 2 potential blind spots for them if they're willing to allow that ESTP to participate and share. And so they can then be a much more effective team. And we start to get them to think about what happens if you don't use extroverted sensation, or what happens if you don't use introverted thinking, to get them to honor and respect what the ESTP has to offer. Just as we're going to get them to think about what happens if they don't use introverted intuition that none of them really like, and they don't use extroverted feeling that none of them really like. And so, while they don't have anybody that prefers introverted intuition or extroverted feeling at the dominant auxiliary, they're now not getting having the negative energy generated as a person tries to use that function. But they have to think about what does it leave out in their process. Because if we don't use introverted intuition, then we do not synthesize the information that we gather through extroverted sensation, introverted sensation, and extroverted intuition to really know what it means. And if we don't use extroverted feeling, then we aren't taking into consideration how others might be relating to the decisions that we're making. And so we can get them to see the value of using both introverted intuition and extroverted feeling. Hopefully we do the same thing with extroverted sensation and introverted thinking so that they can incorporate or make the ESTP feel more at home on the team, have more respect for the ESTP as they start to honor what the ESTP has to bring to the team. And I want to show you as we get into it a little bit more. I think you'll see how that really starts to play or can play out. And so that's these shadow functions. Josh, we will get into that because I can tell you since we started teaching this 8-function model back in 1994, so we've been doing it for a long, long time, and started including it in all of our MBTI certifying programs around 1995-96. So we've been using it for a long, long time. It's based on a model, and I'll show you the model it's based on. If I slip past these and get to this, it's a model that was created by Dr. John Beebe, who's a Jungian analyst, former president of the C.G. Jung Institute in San Francisco. And he did it by building off of Jung's comments, works. One of the things Jung said is it wasn't the functions that were conscious for us that got us in trouble. that it was the functions that were unconscious. And so what Myers had done when she worked with her indicator in type dynamics was to put together a model that had 4 functions of consciousness: a dominant, auxiliary, a tertiary, and an inferior, but ignored the other 4, because Jung had always talked about 8 consciousnesses. And Richard, I can give you some references. I can actually forward some of Beebe's writings on this that are available. They're primarily in articles that have been published in different Association of Psychological Type publications. So I'll be happy to do that. But what Beebe did was went and linked archetypes with the functional positions. And what he found is that what Myers had called the dominant, which Jung had called the superior, he found carried with it heroic energy, and that the auxiliary carried with it good parent energy. And that's what we're going to look at in just a little bit, because that's where I think the 8-function archetype model really comes to life. And so let me just switch, and let's take with the hero, heroine, or that dominant position. What we find is it's the one we trust the most. And yet it's also the one that if someone challenges what we are providing through that, we often feel very threatened. We become defensive. We want to immediately discard or are very quick to get into competition with what someone is saying when they challenge our hero. Now, what happens, think about the conflict that can happen when 2 heroes are engaging. And like on this team where there are 2 ISTJs, both prefer, having that personal experience in the hero position, but they don't have the same personal experience. And so when one says, this is how I have participated and seen it happen, this is what I've experienced, and this is how it really worked. And the other one says, nope, that's not how it worked. It worked this way. And now we can quickly see the 2 hero archetypes, the functions, getting into conflict. The hero archetype is the dominant function, is the function in the dominant position, the energy that it carries, Richard. So it might be extroverted sensation, it might be introverted sensation, it could be any of the 8 but it's whichever one is there. So like if you look at those slides, the 2 slides that have the dynamic patterns, you can see on there that each function attitude is going to be in that heroic position for 2 different type codes. And what we have to do when we're working with that heroic function is recognize that it's got to be honored. And so I think of the hero function is being on a pedestal and needing to stay there. And so whenever the pedestal starts to shake or somebody tries to pull it out from under someone, it now gets really upset, nervous, and goes on the defensive. And so we need to work at recognizing the other person's hero. Or another way of thinking is recognizing their dominant function. And at the same time, we will find that we are fighting to have our own recognized. Now, when we have the hero and the good parent, and this is what, when we think about our type codes, we have our dominant and auxiliary. Normally, the 2 middle letters in our type code represented 1 extroverted, 1 introverted. We think about them working together, and they usually do. But what we find is if you look at that team, there were 2 people that have extroverted have introverted sensation as number one, but there's one person that has introverted sensation as number two. And so what that has now is two of the people are going to want to have their experience honored. The other person is going to be using their personal experience, trying to guide, protect, and direct. And what we find is no hero wants to be guided, protected, or directed, because if it's being guided, protected, and directed, it's not being allowed to function as a hero. It's being subordinated. And so we can get into this conflict between individuals when they're using the same function attitude consciously, but the function attitudes that are being used are in different positions. So we could look at you could also shift over to the extroverted thinking and look at, you've got one with extroverted thinking in the hero position. You've got two with extroverted thinking in the auxiliary position. And so the two with it in the auxiliary position will be trying to parent the other's extroverted thinking, and that parenting often isn't taken very well. So while they can work in a very positive way, they can start to view each other as being very egotistical and stuck on themselves and not willing to listen to the other. And normally the one that perceives that the other is being egotistical and stuck on itself is the one who has the function in the good parent position, because the parent is picking up on the heroic energy of that dominant function, because a lot of our ego goes around that dominant. Now, if we move and look at the next combination, where we're now going with first and third, our hero eternal child, the eternal child brings with it a source of playfulness and creativity. And so it's a tremendous amount of fun to engage in the child, or at least we really get our creative juices going there. Now, the issue with the child is that it can be difficult to control. And often it's emotionally like riding a roller coaster. And so we go up and down. Hang on, let me read Richard's question. Absolutely, Richard. We need to be working at getting people to respect and accept each of the processes in the different positions. And one of the things that we're doing in our work is we're looking at how each of the 8 function attitudes are used in different ways. So like one of our workshops we do is on using these in problem solving. And so we take a critical problem solving model and we look at what each of the function attitudes brings to the different steps in that critical problem solving model. We do the same thing around meeting management, time management. Just put one together the other day for a group on financial management, and which was looking at transitioning of, really it was focused on transitioning people in the military as they come off of active duty and go back into civilian life, often into a situation of unemployment. And how do the 8 function attitudes play a part in helping them make that transition successfully, which requires them to use function attitudes that are not natural for them, or often are not ones that they have, that they trust using, and yet there's a need for it. And so hopefully that that helps. It's not just accepting the other's hero or eternal child, but working at accepting all 8 of the function attitudes and understanding that Jung said we use them all. The question is, are we aware of how we're using them, and are we using them effectively? And so one of the concepts that we work with is this idea of overuse, underuse, and appropriate use. And often we find that our hero and good parent can get inflated and overused. And the others often get underused or shortchanged. And so we work at trying to manage their use so that, and that's what leads to what I call appropriate use, and getting us to think about what function is appropriate for me to use in the moment, and have I individuated that function or developed that function to the point that I can pull it into consciousness and use it appropriately and effectively. And so that's how we can, I think, get team members to respect what other team members have to offer, and also show ourselves where we need to grow. That's right. And encourage. I don't use the word balanced. I go with appropriate to think about. I think we're saying the same thing, just using different words, Richard, because I don't want to think that we have to use each of them the equal amount of time or energy that one might apply with balance. I think, like if we're working like there, if you think about in your days or with your clients as you're working with, a dynamic balance would work. And so let me use the one that's needed at the moment. And so yesterday, like when I was meeting with some people, there were times when I really needed to pull on extroverted sensation and stay in the moment with them and engage, fully listening to what they had to tell me. Also with that, not just listening with my ears, but listening with my eyes to pick up the nonverbals that were being given in facial expressions. And yet, then afterwards, I needed to take that back and use introverted sensation to try to compare it with other engagements that I had had with that person, with those people, to try to really understand it, and then go to extroverted intuition as to what did it possibly mean, what were the possible things it could mean, and then take introverted intuition and try to synthesize and say, okay, this is what it meant. And so in that way, each of the four perceiving function attitudes are playing a role, not just the one that's my dominant function, because my dominant function is introverted sensation. And if I'm staying with introverted sensation, as I'm trying to listen to them, my listening is being distracted by my rushing back to compare it with what they're saying with other things that I have heard them say, or with other things that I've heard from other people. Or, as I watch their nonverbals, I'm now applying emotional reactions to that based on how I've seen others react. And so that's what where I'm trying to go with that. And yes, hopefully it helps us develop personally, and it helps us have much, much more respect for the other person. And so what we find is when we're engaging, and if we take INFP and ISTJ, what we find is the hero of one is the child of the other. And when we get there in that arrangement, what we find is the INFP and the ISTJ can really get each other's creative juices going, and that this engagement can be so energizing that they don't know when to stop. They don't know how to reel it in. And they also can be very upset when it's not receiving any more attention. And I said they may pout. And so understand that that every child likes a hero and looks up to the hero, and every hero likes to be looked up to. And so you get that relationship going, and it can be very positive. It can also be very hard to manage. And so that's what we have to watch. And then if the one tries to break out of that relationship and not the hero is not giving the child as much attention as it has been giving, now the child is upset. We also have that the hero often wants to keep the child in that child position and not allow the child to develop and become an equal, because then if it becomes an equal, then the hero can no longer be the hero. And so we have that relationship at play that we have to work with and understand. Let's move to the inferior. And here, that inferior, that, or as Beebe called it, the anima animus, it works to stabilize the hero, and so it has a grounding effect to it almost. It also serves as a pathway to the unconscious. And as it does that, it can often be very attractive. It can, we can almost find ourselves falling in love with our inferior. We can also find that we feel very inferior or have an inferiority complex when we are around others who have our inferior in the hero position, because it seems that they can do so much more with it than we ever could or have the potential to. And so, we have to, when we've got that hero-inferior relationship with other people, we have to work at accepting ourselves as being competent to engage with that function attitude and not feel that we are too inferior to speak up. And so that's when, that issue of being overwhelmed. And so, the hero needs to be reassuring the inferior that it is worthy. And so, that's what we find is, often the hero is enjoying being heroic and doesn't take time to honor someone who's trying to use the same function attitude, but that function attitude is in the inferior or in that anima animus position. And so, that's what we need to do, is work at, if it's in our hero position, we need to work at trying to reassure others as they try to do it. And, let them know that it's, hang on, I'm sorry, Richard, is the hero a parent, good parent going to be in the first place, E or I? The hero will always be the dominant. And so, if we think about type dynamics, I can say dominant is first, auxiliary second. And if I go to type code, we're not talking first letter, second letter, third letter, fourth letter. First through the fourth letters in our type code are not going to change positions. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about what that code represents, which is the position or dynamic pattern for each of the 8 function attitudes that Jung identified. Is that clear? That's right. Hero is dominant, good parent is auxiliary, child is tertiary. So extroverted sensing is the hero for the ESTP and the ESFP. It's the good parent for the ISTP and the ISFP. And when you look at, like my type code is ISTJ, extroverted sensing is going to be in the 5th position, or the opposing personality position, for ISTJs and ISFJs. Richard, are you following me? Okay. Trying to think how to how to make it easier for you. Okay, so for an INFJ, introverted intuition is the hero. Extroverted feeling is the good parent. Introverted thinking is going to be the eternal child. And extroverted sensation is going to be the inferior. And then extroverted intuition is going to be the opposing personality. Introverted feeling is going to be the negative parent. Extroverted thinking is going to be the trickster. And introverted sensation is going to be the demonic. And so if you take, that's for the INFJ. And so let me try to work with that a little bit as we're right here looking at the hero, heroine, and the inferior. Gosh. Yeah, Richard, slide 3 lays it out for you. Slides 3 and 4. Slide 3 for the introverted, slide 4 for the extroverted. Glad the sound is a little better. Let me just, if I take that's right, the function orders align. Heroes number 1, good parents number 2, eternal child's number 3, inferior is number 4, or the animus is number 4, right on down. So, Richard, if I take INFJ with introverted intuition in the hero position, introverted intuition is that synthesizing of information to give it, to know what it means, or to, another way would say, to have insight from that information with a tremendous sense of this is it. This is what is there. Now, extroverted sensation is about being in the physical moment. Introverted intuition does not work if it's engaged when a person is engaged in the physical moment. So it's very difficult for introverted intuition and extroverted sensation to work together, this hero and inferior. And so, like, if the INFJ were with the ESTP, and the extroverted sensation ESTP is wanting to respond to what's happening in the environment and just engage it and quickly shift to something else that's happening and move on. The introverted intuition, the person with introverted intuition is now working in that hero position, is going to be very frustrated with that quick shifting of energy and not taking the reflection time to absorb and assimilate to know what it means. Let's see. Can I repeat that? Boy, I'll try. And so what we get, Richard, is that INFJ with introverted intuition in the hero position is going to want to grasp the meaning, to know what's there, not what's beneath the surface, can we say, to really understand the concept, to get the meaning of the concept. Extroverted sensation, which would be the inferior, is not concerned about understanding the concept at all. Extroverted sensation is only concerned about engaging in the moment. And so extroverted sensation will want to quickly engage, have the experience, and then move to the next thing that's attractive to engage it and have that experience. And so there's really no reflection with extroverted sensation. There's tremendous reflection with introverted intuition, and so that's how the the hero, heroine, inferior are opposite in the INFJ. Is that helping? Okay, you appreciate your explanation. I take that to mean it didn't clarify as well as I had hoped it would. Um, my daughter is an INFJ, and so one of the ways that I find that the inferior extroverted sensation works with her is that my daughter gets overwhelmed by everything that's happening in the world at the moment in her life. And so she has tremendous difficulty dealing with everything that's going on, especially right now. She's got 3-month-old twins, and she's just so overwhelmed with everything that she has to do to take care of those babies and take care of herself and the house and all of those, that. On the other hand, introverted sensation is my wife's hero, and she's like, well, can't you think about, what happened earlier, how you did things earlier, whatever. And my wife has finally had to learn to realize that my daughter doesn't have all the experiences that she has and can't pull from it. And so we get to see that introverted sensation, extroverted sensation conflict that happens between the hero opposing personality we will look at in just a moment. But just trying to understand the issues. Josh, I think that's neat that INFJs expect their literal surroundings to fail them, or at least they expect that what they perceive the literal surroundings to be really aren't the literal surroundings, that they have misread them, that they aren't what they expect them to be. Let's look at the hero opposing personality and see if I can, we'll stay with the introverted intuition, the INFJ on that. And so here we're looking at introverted intuition versus extroverted intuition. And so the opposing personality is the one that counters the hero-heroine. It attempts to derail it, prevent it from making it, and the positive side is it can prevent it from doing some things that are very seriously in error. It views the hero-heroine as caught up in itself and wants to have nothing to do with it, while the hero-heroine sees the opposing personality as a waste of energy, waste of time, and often has difficulty constraining itself from telling the opposing personality just to stay in its place. And so opposing means, it's opposite in attitude. That's right. So it's like introverted intuition is in the hero position, extroverted intuition is in the opposing personality position. Or if extroverted intuition is in the hero position, introverted intuition is in the opposing personality position. That's right, Josh. All you're doing is switching the attitude with the function. And what Jung said is that introverted intuition and extroverted intuition are at war with one another. We're going to look at that in just toward the end, hopefully, Josh, where what we have found is they are opposite in a way. We refer to them as complementary opposites. And so I think of my introverted sensation and my extroverted intuition is working in a complementary way, where my introverted sensation and extroverted intuition, extroverted sensation, introverted sensation and extroverted sensation really work in a conflictual way. That's right. So when we're working with introverted intuition and extroverted sensation, we would expect them to work as a tandem process and can be very positive, where we would expect introverted intuition and extroverted intuition to be very conflictual. And so what I find is with introverted intuition in that heroic position and extroverted intuition in the opposing personality position, introverted intuition in the hero says, I have already gained the insight. I know. And so it's like, I know what needs to be done. And extroverted intuition is saying, wow, we might do this. We might explore, look at this. Here's another option. Here's a fourth option. And introverted intuition sees all of that as a waste of time by saying, I already know what needs to be done. Let's get on with doing it. That's correct. NE is divergent. NI is convergent. Great way of looking at it. And so, so we get that, but it doesn't just have, that's NE and NI in this position, but you can take any of them and put them in this position, not just NI and NE. You could put TE and TI or FE and FI, and you're still going to get this kind of energy reaction. And that's what the archetypes bring, is starting to understand that energy reaction that goes on as these opposing function attitudes engage. Let's look at the hero-heroine negative parent. And what we have with the negative parent is the negative parent is often on the attack. And so it attacks others, and we also use it to attack ourselves. And what it tends to do is just stop the hero or heroine in its tracks. And, I think that often when we see people just say, hey, I can't do this job anymore. I've got to do something else, that often, that negative parent has stepped up and stopped them. And so, don't think that when I say negative might be too strong a word. Another word I've used is critical parent. And so, for INFJ, this is introverted feeling. So where extroverted feeling, for introverted intuition in the hero position, is knowing what needs to be done, introverted feelings is saying, but this violates your value system. This isn't the right thing to do. And so now what we've got is the hero in it being held to task by the core values of the individual. That's internal. You go external and, it's someone else's core values holding a person to task. And so it's like it's viewing the hero-heroine as being off course and wanting to pull it back in line, and doing so in a very abrupt way. There's very little nice about how that negative parent or critical parent interacts. And so when you think about it on a team, this is when somebody calls another up short in a very, what we might call, rude way, or often inappropriate way. Because what I find is often when we use our negative parent with its just innate critical parent energy, or witch cynics energy as BB referred to it, we afterwards often wish we could apologize or find ourselves going to apologize for what we have just done. And so that's that's what we find with that hero negative parent interaction. Now, when we go to the hero heroine trickster and start looking at the functions there, and for the INFJ, that's going to be extroverted thinking. That's going to be in that trickster position. And one of the things you might find is, extroverted thinking is my good parent. So as most of my presentations get put together, they're really put together with a lot of extroverted thinking. And so what I find is INFJs often struggle, or I struggle to be able to get my point across to INFJs because my extroverted thinking immediately engages them in their trickster energy. And so it tends to fool and confuse, where that's not the intent of my extroverted thinking. That's what extroverted thinking just does for INFJs. And so, we can start to understand how that energy is going. And so if you think about extroverted thinking in the hero position, where that logic needs to be recognized and honored, and here's extroverted thinking in the trickster position, where it's confused, we now start to see how there can be the conflict. Okay, Richard, let's see. Josh says, is the trickster function tricking yourself, or might you use the function on others in a trickster way? We do both, Josh. I can use my trickster function, extroverted feeling, for me, because my type code's ISTJ. I can use my trickster function to trick you, or I can be tricked by someone else using their extroverted feeling, because my extroverted feeling is in the trickster position. For example, one of the things that happened to me yesterday is my business partner in Washington, D.C. was picking me up at the airport for us to go to a meeting. And as I was walking through the terminal, I called him on the cell phone to let him know where I was and asked him if he wanted a cup of coffee. He wanted me to get him a cup of coffee, and he told me no, because I was on the early flight into D.C., and I knew he left home early to get there, and he said, well, he had already had one. He didn't need one. And I get out in the car, and we're in the car, and he looks over, and he says, Bob, where's your coffee? I said, I didn't want a cup of coffee. I was just trying to be nice to you and get you a cup of coffee. See, that's what extroverted feeling does. It works at trying to please other people. And so as I tried to use that, he was now thinking, well, okay, Bob's getting him a cup of coffee, and he's just offering to get me one too. And when it was just offering to get him one without my wanting one myself, he was now fooled. And so that's it. And okay, Richard, thanks for acknowledging INFJ as your type code, because when we look at just a moment, what we find is INFJs and ISTJs don't share any processes in consciousness together. So it's very, very difficult for ISTJs and INFJs to understand one another. I've got a very good friend here in Louisville, Kentucky, who's INFJ, and we have tremendous respect for each other, but it takes us forever to communicate effectively. And what Bibi says is that really we need to find someone who has introverted intuition or introverted sensation, our heroes, in either the inferior or the opposing personality position, and let them act as a translator for us. Because dynamically we're wired so differently until it's extremely difficult for us to get our point across to the other. And so what I find is that that's where respect is so important, is I have to take what she tells me and go sit with it and wrestle with it. And then after a while, we will, I will understand what she's saying. And she will do the same thing with me. And often it's on like the third or fourth discussion that we're having on a topic. She'll say, oh, so that's what you've been trying to say all along. And I said, yep, that's what I've been trying to say all along. It's taken us that long to get to understanding. And Josh just, recognized that his auxiliary good parent and my auxiliary good parent are the same. And so, Josh, as you think about that, think about, you and Richard share the same hero of introverted intuition, but you have different auxiliaries. Richard has extroverted feeling and you have extroverted thinking. And the difference that makes is I talk through the dominant. I need to go back and restate what I had said on who to find. We need to look at our inferior and opposing personality positions. So extroverted sensation is Richard's inferior and your inferior, and extroverted intuition is mine. And so someone who had either extroverted sensation or extroverted intuition could help us overcome that. What's happening with you and I, Richard, is we're connecting through extroverted thinking. And so the logic flow is making sense as it moves just across good parent to good parent is what we're getting there. And so, that's just how we see it moving. And so we look at, how confusing the trickster can be. I want to move to the demonic just a moment. And then I'll shift and really try to focus on what we were on that point for us just a little bit, Josh. And that is when we look at hero demonic, which is where the two of you are with me. My hero is your demonic is my hero. And so the function that's most trusted by me is the one that's most unknown or rejected by you. And yet, when we can engage the other's hero, which means that we're engaging our own demonic, we can find it to be just a tremendous source of creativity and can come across as true genius. And we can really feel great about ourselves. Now, the issue, though, is that as we are working with one another, often we are attempting to destroy what the other is about. And we find it difficult to accept, to trust, or acknowledge what the other person is saying, because the demonic is working in a way that really just exceeds our ability to comprehend. And so we have to take it and work with it for a long, long time before we can comprehend how it got there or what it means to us. Now, at the same time, often we get access to this through our dreams. And absolutely, Richard, it is the demonic that's trying to destroy the other. And so the demonic is trying to destroy the hero. And so my intuitions are often pushing me to reject my past experiences. And that's how I find my introverted intuition is trying to get me to just completely disregard my past experience, which means disregarding my hero, which is very, very difficult for me to do. And so that's, and so you might think about, as the two of you work with introverted intuition, how do you let your past experiences override the insights that you're getting? And Josh, you've been working as an attorney. Richard's working as a counselor. And you're probably pulling tremendously on those intuitions. What happens when all of a sudden you sit back and you say, well, this intuition isn't tracking with my past experience? That's right. Our traditional advice overrides your intuition. And now the fight that you find yourself in. But you can imagine, while we're kind of going internal with it, you can also think about what's happening on the team when, if you've got the insight and I'm trying to say, well, but past experience says this. This is what happened to us when we worked this project before, and you've got an intuition that you're trying to give me for how we should move forward. You can see how that introverted sensation and introverted intuition can get into conflict with it. Now, what you've got in the slides, I take it through, I work through the good parent all the way through the positions. Now, the reason we didn't, I don't go any further than that, don't try to look at eternal child with inferior, eternal child with opposing personality, is we just haven't gotten that much data yet. We haven't been able to complete that kind of work. It's just, I can tell you, John Beebe and I are working on it. We do a couple of workshops every other year where we gather, we get about 40 to 50 people attend the workshops, and we explore these things and try to come up with something that that works, that we can go at least test with our clients and see whether or not we have found the truth, and then if we have, we start to integrate it. But to move beyond the hero heroine and reactions to others, and the good parent reactions to others, we really haven't gotten that far yet, and so that's future work that's still to be done. But what I want to do is shift right quick to another slide, and then we will come back, because I think this will help you understand the interpersonal conflict things that we're talking about. And I just got to bounce through these. The software doesn't give me an easy way of getting through it. But Josh, this is kind of going back to your question about the relationships and the interpersonal relationships. And so it's kind of interesting. I have INTJ there. So what we find is when all four letters in the type code are different, like INTJ, ESFP, notice that you share the same four function attitudes in consciousness, but they're in the opposite order. They're in reverse order. And so that kind of gets that tandem relationship going that you were talking about earlier, Josh. And so what we find with that is that relationship gets going. It's often very positive for both people. The downside is both of you tend to ignore or have in the unconscious the same four function attitudes. And so you can have some tremendous blind spots while it seems that you are working together extremely effectively. And so, that's what we get with these complementary codes. Now, when I went through my initial type training, I was told that these two were the opposites, and you would not expect ESFPs and INTJs to get along. And I worked with that understanding and tried to make it real for probably, I'd say, about 5 or 6 years before I realized it. That just wasn't the case. And when I went to, as we got into using the 8 functions more and looked at this, and then when BB brought in his model of how they work together in tandem, then it really started to make sense as to why I was struggling to understand why people that had all 4 letters different in type code could get along very well together and often enjoy working together tremendously. And so that's that's what we found there. Now I want to move from that to what we call the conflicting codes. And these are ones that back in my older days I thought they should have, it should be easy for them to work together. And this is where the 2 middle letters in the type code are the same, but the outside letters are different. Because what we find is what's number 1 for one is number 5 for the other, the hero opposing personality. It's the good parent, critical parent, or good parent, negative parent. It's the eternal child trickster. It's the animus or inferior to the demonic. And so there's this, they're not sharing anything in consciousness with one another. And they're set up position-wise, hero versus hero, good parent versus good parent, eternal child versus eternal child, anima animus versus anima animus. Going off what Jung said about extroverted sensation being continually at war with introverted sensation, and introverted feeling being continually at war with extroverted feeling. And so that's correct, Josh. It's true for if you switch the EI and JP, you keep the 2 middle letters the same, this will always be true. If the first and fourth letter are different, and the second and third are the same, you'll find this combination. Just like with the other one that we were looking at, right here, it's when all 4 letters are different, you'll find this combination. So now let's look at the one which fits with Richard and me, which is where the outside letters are the same, but the 2 inside letters are different. So for Richard and me, it's INFJ and ISTJ. My example here happens to be ESFP, ENTP. And now what we find is number 1 is number 8, number 2 is number 7, number 3 is number 6, number 4 is number 5, and so forth. So there, it's like turning the model upside down. And when we get this dynamically opposite relationship, it's like confusion. I think of it, and for years described it, or tried to describe it as like ships passing in the night in heavy fog. And so I spent 7 years in Europe, and so I think about the fog on the English Channel, and they talk, and how thick it can be, and ships can be just a couple of yards apart and pass one another without seeing the other. And I think that's what it's like when we're trying to communicate, and our type codes have this dynamically opposite relationship. And yep, it's like our type strengths are opposite. Absolutely, Richard. Now, the positive side, and I told you my daughter's INFJ. My daughter and I, okay, Josh, I hope we finish at 2:30, okay? My daughter and I are dynamic opposites to one another. And when we co-facilitate a workshop, it's phenomenal because strength is, my blind spot. My blind spot, my strength is her blind spot. And so we can, we have to work with respect. It's that the other person is doing what needs to be done. And if we can do that, it's fantastic. And so that's working there. I want to show you another slide right quick that is something I got to get through all of these with the 8 functions where I put them in here to explain them to you. But I wanted to show you this slide because I sent all of you, well, you've got a packet of the 16 types and approach to critical problem solving. And this applies the 8 functions in a holistic way without people knowing that they're working the 8 functions. And this was some research that I did back in, I think, 1993 with about 300 people, each scattered around the type table. All types were represented, although the artisan types, the SP types, were a little underrepresented. And what we do with this is I just give people their form, their hand, and I ask them to evaluate how well each of these statements would work for them. And so if it doesn't work very well, they can put a 1, or if it works really well, they can put a 5, anywhere in between. If it really doesn't fit them at all, they can put NA. And on that sheet, when you look at it on the sheet, you'll find there's actually a place they could write in something else if they were to say something. And so if I wanted to apply the 8 functions, or the 8 function archetypes, without really having to talk about extroverted sensation versus introverted sensation and just wanted to stay at the 4-letter codes, I could get the team members to complete each of these and then use that as talking papers and say, all right, let's see, Bob as an IS, what did you say you would like to do under recognize and define the problems? What had others said, and how did you rate them? And so if I share that about me, you're getting some understanding of how I go about using those 8 function archetypes. And then if you look at, Richard, if you look at the INFJ one, you'll see that it's really different from what's on the ISTJ one. And Josh, if you look at the INTJ, you'll find it's different from the ISTJ. Each of them are different, and it gives you a way to pull them. Josh, it was a master's thesis that was never published, and what you have, or I can tell you quickly, and we might need to talk offline about it. I'm trying to watch the clock and your battery time. I'd have to work to look to even see if I've got a copy of it now. But as I got their responses, what I did was pull the modal responses, and that's what's reflected on these sheets as I put that research together. But it's really I have found it really good to use to help get team members to put their approach to how they go about doing things on the table with other team members, and really to do it in a way of trying to build respect. Oh, so you like to do this, and I like to do that. How do we now go about honoring what each other wants to do? And so that's how we can go about doing that. Now, I want to open it up to questions for you. I know you only can type them in, but the other thing is I would ask you. We have a program that a web-based program that we built called the Function-Archetype Decoder, Function-Archetype Decoder, which really allows you to take teams and not have to create the matrix by yourself, but it creates a matrix, and each cell in the matrix has a pop-up attached to it that gives you information on how you can expect that function attitude and that position to react or respond. And so it's really great to be able to put a team together on there and pull that up. I've got people that use it in some ways where they show it to the team and they let the team talk about it. I've got others who want to use it to build their own knowledge so they can go in and really impress the team with how much they know. Josh, we don't sell it, we license it. And we license it for, I think it's $247 for the first year, and then it's $39 every year thereafter. And that's because we update it each year, because we're learning so much new information as we work with teams. And so if we were to just publish a book, write it, it would be obsolete by the time we got it out there. And so this way, by having it in an electronic version, we can keep going. And I do a 30-minute free webinar on it to show people what it looks like. And so, please don't hesitate to sign up for it and attend. And with that, you get a 1-week free demo of it to try it and work with it. So with that, what questions do you have about ways you can go about using the 8 function archetypes with teams? If you don't have any, if you would, just send me a note that says none or something so I'll know where you are. Okay, that's good. Richard, I will shoot those articles off, to both you and Josh, so you'll have them to read. What I want you both to know is that I want you to please feel free to pick up the phone and call or email me with your questions. Richard, I'm really concerned about how my style didn't really work that well at getting the point, it being clear for you. And so please engage and let's work with it. I'm not sure what you mean by my talking papers, Richard. So I don't know what's there. So Richard, I just ask you if you would drop me a. Oh yeah, okay. I'll shoot you mine, and I think I've actually got somewhere I compare. I put mine next to BB, so do the crosswalk in a workshop. The reason I switched is I found that dealing with corporate America, they had some trouble with his archetypal names, and so I needed to find ways to talk about the energies, because John and I talked about the fact that these energies are really just telling us, the archetypal names represent the emotional energy the position carries. And so I tried to find a name that worked better for the business world that I work in. And so with that, I know Josh is about to run out of energy. If both of you would, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, and I will, if you've got questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And so thanks so very much for being with me this afternoon. And with that, I'll say goodbye to both of you.